this amazing piece on Medium. And that's really what made me say, I need to talk to Janeen, because it felt like freedom, that piece. So tell me a little bit about that piece and what inspired that piece.
Wow. You know, when I left my last role, and honestly, I think in many ways said goodbye to the nonprofit sector and to philanthropy because I was so exhausted. I mentally, physically, emotionally, like every part of me was exhausted of trying to fit into these two sectors that ultimately, I think what I realized weren't deserving of me, of what I brought, of that brilliance of my voice. And that now I look back and I reflect on all the ways that I pushed and I tried and see me and please like take action. And when none of that was coming, I think for me, it was just this big moment to look in the mirror of who I was, what I deserved, and who they were, right? And in my journey and with what I believe in, my own value system, how misaligned it all was. And that the only thing I could control was kind of me and what I was deserving of, and realizing that those weren't the places, as much as they were places, I think, from the outside, right, that are there to do good within our communities. Being inside and seeing how problematic that is at times, and the conversations that are had on behalf of community, and that just all didn't sit right with me anymore, right? And I think leaving was part scary, a little terrifying of I've built 8+ years of my career in both of these sectors. I have nowhere to go in terms of a job, but what I know deep down is that this isn't right for me anymore. That the fact that I come home and can't even like have a conversation with my husband because of how exhausted I am isn't okay, right? I was so disconnected from like friends and family because it consumed me so much. I gave so much of myself. I tried like 150%, to do and be more, and it just wasn't working. And I had to be honest about that. And what I realized as I was going through all of that, in many ways in silence, I wasn't, also because of the nature of the role, I couldn't be as vocal, I think, as I usually am with colleagues, even in the workplace, of what was happening. And so I knew eventually, and it took me time to get there, right? To even sit down and write the piece that you read, because I needed time to heal so much of what I, went through alone. But I knew it was important to share because as I opened up with other women about that experience and they reflected back how much that resonated with them, I said, this is important for me to share. I remember I said that and I didn't know how I was going to do that. But I just knew that I wanted to, because we deserve to talk about these things, because then we go through them and then we think I'm the only one going through this, and it's not true. And it was both painful, healing, and freeing to write that piece for me, and to just be honest about what I encountered, both a little bit of philanthropy. I didn't really get into the weeds of that because there's so much more, but in the nonprofit sector. And that ultimately, I think one of the biggest weights that I had as an executive director in making this decision was this commitment that I think I felt, and that's this deep responsibility for the community that I was serving. But I had to have also, like, I talked and coached myself a lot through this, of if the community knew what I was experiencing, they wouldn't want that for me either. As much as I'm like, they will never know.
Right.
Right? They will never know. but I trust that would be true for them. And so I think that gave me the freedom to say, hey, okay, you're going to do this. You're going to trust in many ways that as much as this isn't the space for you, that you're going to figure out kind of what is next, because you deserve so much more than that. And that whole just decision in itself was a journey. And you know, doing my best to give honor to that experience and to my truth was the peace and wanting to share that with anyone, with everyone, whoever could, I could get that across from. And it's honestly sparked a lot of conversations, amongst women that some I don't know. And now here with you, right? It was this whole, like, I want to share this. I don't know how I'm going to do this.
Yeah, but you said so much there. I mean, the thing that I battle with and have battled with in the nonprofit sector in particular is that it's this social good sector. It's this sector that is really, and the founders and the people who drive those organizations really want to see some positive change in this respective industries that they champion, and there's so much damage done internally. And I've experienced that time and time again. And you know this about me, that I was in a role, maybe it was 2018-ish, I think it was. I was in a role where I came in, I see myself as someone who, I see myself as someone who's is super like passionate about certain issues, and really drawn to organizations because of their own missions. And so you get attracted to that, and then the reality of the organization will hit you.
Right.
And then I found myself in this place where I was devalued, diminished, where I was given 4 jobs to perform, from all the administrative tasks to the director level expectations. And when I handed my role over to someone, when I decided that I had to leave, that person sat across from me and was in tears, just having taken like a day or two of the role on as we were transitioning. And because the leadership of the organization believed in her, they gave her support people, and they gave her what she needed to do well at the job. And she's a super, I mean, I love her and think that she's an amazingly capable person. So this is in no way anything about her. But what I felt was that, these organizations sometimes set you up for failure and then call you a failure, right? And what I reflect on is that the systems that these organizations are built on are the same systems that we're fighting against. The systems and the hierarchies and the authoritarian kind of I'm the leader, you follow me kind of thing, just because, not because I've actually earned it, but because of my power.
Right.
All the power structures, all the systems that we're even in those organizations hitting out against are very much living and breathing in those organizations. And that for me has become more and more apparent. And so when people say we have to reimagine this entire thing, we have to strip away this entire thing, like if they talk about defunding the police or abolishing prisons, like for me, that's what I think needs to happen with the nonprofit sector, is we have to strip away this entire thing, in the sense that if you built your nonprofit with the master's tools, there's something to look at. If you built your nonprofit with the same thing that the tech sector people built their corporations on, or if you built your nonprofit on patriarchy and the oppression of any group,
right,
well, then I think it's time to re-examine it. And that's what I took. Like when I heard you just saying, like, if the people in the community knew,
yeah,
they would rally for me. Like they would say, absolutely, because they experience this as a social good, but they're not expecting that you would be harmed. in the process of the social good happening.
Right. Whew. And that was like a big moment for me to come into even that thought, and that is like accepting that, because it went unsaid, right? So much of what happened, you know, it just happened the way it did. But I think, you know, the other thing as you were talking that I also want to say is that one of the hardest things that I encountered as I came in, you know, I came in after a founder who stayed in place, another woman of color, and to see all the ways that what you're saying plays out, right? In the way that she survived through bringing this nonprofit to life, you know, and what it meant for another woman to come in after her, and some of the support or not support that I had, or some of the damage that had been done kind of through her leadership in the community, and trying to kind of like pick up all the pieces of all of that. But I think at the core of it, and I'm very much like learning how to heal through this, right? The internalized oppression that I encountered as I had many moments with her. One, trying to come in with some compassion of like why it was that, you know, she was operating from certain places, and also trying to set boundaries so that I could protect myself. And I don't know how, you know, and it's not the first place where it's happened, but like how you heal through moments like that, sitting across another woman who can look like you, can have similar experiences as you, but also understanding how embedded this all is, right? Like when we talk about white supremacy and the way that we've survived in this system and what it means for us individually, that was a big thing that also came up for me in seeing that, but also seeing that and knowing that a lot of what had occurred wasn't my responsibility to take on. And I think that's one of the last things, you know, that I really voiced to the board of directors, is just saying, you know what, now that I see, like you said, it takes you time to come in and to kind of see what's unfolding, what's happened, and to say, this isn't my job. You know, there's a lot of it that you all get to take responsibility of as a board, you know, as I know things that came your way, whether you've ignored it or whatever you chose to do, it needs to be addressed, and you get to do that now. And I get to move on.
Yeah. And, you know, your point about healing, I think, is one of the other reasons I wanted to talk to you, because what I've realized is that, okay, I believe deeply that if you live long enough, you're going to experience trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I believe deeply that many of our systems are so traumatic. So if you've been educated in the United States and you've been in school, you're going to bring trauma from that. If you've been in universities, you're going to have a whole series of things from that, right? So you come into your workplace already with stuff that is like hard that you need to process, right? And what I recognize is many of us, there are a number of us not doing any healing work on that, and not like examining how we got to where we are. And so the internalized oppression is huge. And you know, the ways that I know that I've been complicit over the years,
Yeah.
ways that I know that I haven't supported the person that needed my support who looked like me, the ways that I know that I was silent when I could have maybe said something, is baggage that I had carried for a long time. And you know, I think of specific instances as I'm talking where, you know, there was so much fear
Mm-hmm.
about losing my job.
Yeah.
There was so much fear around, I'm a single mother, I need this paycheck, I gotta hold on at all costs.
Yeah.
And so the silence, right? But that, when I think about the systems that, again, that this whole workforce is built on, it's built on do what I say. It's built on being fear of losing your livelihood, right? Because there's the idea that your job is your source of this thing. And I've come into, through healing, a new understanding. So I've come into a new understanding through healing myself. And healing is a continuum. Like I feel like we're always doing it.
Right.
But I've come into the value, the self-love extends into the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of loving myself extends into when I'm standing there in a workplace and I'm feeling diminished. I have a choice. And I have a choice to speak up or to say, this isn't working for me. And to keep my own peace of mind, I'm actually going to walk away. And like you said, you hand it, you go ahead and, take it from here. Um, but that takes some getting to, right?
Yeah.
Like, I can't tell you that I was there 10 years ago. Um, it takes some getting to. So I think there's just more healing work to be done as far as workplaces and how we show up.
Right. You know, that also brings something else up for me because it takes, for me, it took stability for me to get to a place where I was like, I'm ready. I felt like I had the mental headspace, right? And I say this because what I realized when I was working at Tipping Point, as I like came into a lot of the work that I was doing, was when I was talking to younger women in the workplace. I'm talking about women of color in their young 20s. What they kind of reflected back to me is like, we're surviving, Janeen. Like, I think when we get more stability, we'll get to the place where we can like address so much of the trauma. But I think it gave me pause because I didn't realize how much I had done that as well, right? Like how much I was just like, I just need to work. I just need to do this, like figure out what's next. And trying to understand also as you enter both nonprofit and philanthropy, the system, right? And understanding how to play within that system. Um, and then also just coming into, for me, there was some privilege and I'm learning how to access right now. And that's another thing that I'd love to address is like, how do I initially was, therapy and like yoga and, some of it was costly and I was at a place where I could afford that. But I think also rethinking what that could mean and it being something that also can be done like this. I think this is healing, right? I think it's, sharing truth with each other. I think finding support in a women's group is another, way to do that. But I think it's so important. And I think that there's a lot of courage to start that process for yourself, to really begin to critically examine so many things in your life, to revisit trauma, to sit with your truth, to sit with what that means in the context of family. There's so much. And I think once you open up that journey, you can't just like, it's hard sometimes and it's messy and you can't just be like, okay, I'm going to close that. I'm done healing for like a few months. It's ongoing. And I have found so much freedom through this journey. And yet I've sat in some really, really hard and painful moments. I've had some really difficult conversations with myself, with my mother, at the workplace, right? I think the more that I understood the importance of this journey, as I found, or as I connected, I would say more, with more of myself and my truth and my worth, I think like there is this balance of like healing and finding freedom and finding the courage to really be me. And as I shared more of that in myself, I also like caught the reality of how uncomfortable that was for other people. How uncomfortable it was for me to actually voice, hey, this isn't working for me. I remember being in a work meeting and saying, in all parts of me disagree with the conversation, with the decisions that are currently being made. I don't even know where to go anymore in the direction of like having to sit through this meeting that this is the first time I've ever done this, Damali. I said, I actually need to step away. Because I felt, you know, if I continued to even just stay there silent, that I was complicit in just like everything that was being decided that I felt was just not right. And I literally remember just walking out of the room. I walked out of the office and I was just walking down the financial district because I was just like, I can't, like, obviously that moment was very telling for me because I knew I needed to find my way out. um but it's those moments where you're like, no, I can't continue to do this, right? For something that's not right, for something that I don't believe in, for something that I've expressed for a really long time, and I've tried to present different ideas, I've tried to present, you know, different ways to really be in support of the community that we're trying to serve. But when I'm being met with not even, I think, a space that's even really listening to me, then what do I can why do I continue to want to be seen in that space?
Right. I mean, you said so many things. I mean, so many things. So I want to touch on a couple. The healing piece and the readiness. You know, it's interesting because, you know, when you talk about trauma like I talk about it, which I talk about it all the time, it's like a thing that I am aware of. It's so prevalent and so just a part of our experience that I talk about it openly, which I know is not comfortable for everyone. But when I think back, I mean, there were many, I would call myself almost a decade of just being not ready, of being in my life 10, 15 years, of knowing that I'd carried all this hurt and all this pain from all these places and just not been ready and not been in a place. Like, I think the body also protects us in those moments too. So it's like you're in survival. And so I know survival mode, and have come to this place, even as I'm on my path, of respecting every person's journey, path, process. So when a person says, you know, I'm not ready or I don't want to talk about that, I'm like, okay, because I know that their body knows and they'll be ready when they're ready, whenever that is. And that is tough, you know, in close relationships in particular, when you feel like, oh, if you just, but again, you know, it's everyone's time. But what's been really helpful for me is healing circles. And so I know you know this about me, that I'm a part of this monthly circle where nothing is off the table. Everything is discussed. Anything that's on someone's heart is valid and valuable and heard and welcomed and made space for. And that has actually been this eye-opening process for me about how we can hear very different experiences, very different perspectives, and still sit and understand and respect difference. So that's been invaluable. And for the meetings and the workplace stuff, I want to say this, that I've only just come to a place where I'm like, no, I'm not going to sit here and do this piece. Actually, I'm going to interrupt that and say, you know what? I vehemently disagree. And either I had this conversation recently where it was a conversation that I felt was one of those conversations where we just check boxes to say we talked about it.
Right.
We just say that we did the thing and we move on. And I was like, you know, I don't want to check any boxes and move on. I want this to be taken seriously, especially in the context of where we are in this moment in history and where we are in the people that we're serving. I think it's important. And so I've only just come to that place, which is like you're walking out, you know, which is like you're like, no, you know, and having people really see. And like to your other point though, is so many of us push, like agitate, and then it's like, but am I valued in this space? Am I agitating to deaf ear? Like, you know,
Right.
to people who are really checked out. And if that's the case, what's the point?